Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, if you use the railways, some good news tonight. The next 2 days of strikes on Southern Rail by members of the RMT have been suspended as talks restart. But if you're planning to travel by Eurostar at the weekend or over the August bank holiday, the very same union has announced industrial action there. The Eurostar dispute is in fact the third that the RMT has launched in recent weeks against different rail operators, as Michael Crick now reports.
Commuters tonight at London's Victoria Station. They're naturally pleased this week's strike has been suspended, but rail passengers' troubles are far from over. The RMT union has instructed its members to resume normal working from 10 o'clock tonight, but because of planning problems, Southern Trains warns that tomorrow's services will only be based on the strike timetable like today, although they hope to do rather better than that, and then resume normal services on Friday. But even then, those services will only be based on the revised and rather reduced timetable that was in force before the strike. The talks will resume at ACAS tomorrow. This dispute is largely about train conductors operating train doors. In future, Southern want drivers to open and close doors, but say conductors will still be on board to look after passengers, except in exceptional circumstances, such as staff shortages, when trains could have just a driver. The RMT insists on always 2 staff per train.
Why doesn't anyone ever ask the question if trains are safe without conductors in a lot of cases? Why are they worried?
So you blame the RMT rather than the company?
I do.
It's just having someone there, I think, is a kind of comfort thing. Whether they'd be able to help or do anything is another question, but I think people just like to know that there's a person on a train. No one wants to be on a train with 800 people and there's no one on it.
Southern Rail! Southern Fail! This morning, the third day of their strike, RMT members protested outside the Department for Transport.
They're trying to get in a situation where that guarantee of a guard in every train goes. And they'll be able to run trains with only one person on that, which is the train driver. So ultimately it is about jobs, but predominantly about making sure we run a safe railway, safe trains, safe passengers.
The RMT held today's demo at the Transport Department because they say a top civil servant there, Peter Wilkinson, is very hostile to the union. In February, in a meeting at Croydon Town Hall, Mr. Wilkinson told commuters,
over the next 3 years, we're going to be having punch-ups and we will see industrial action, and I want your support.
Of train drivers, he said,
we have got to break them.
Adding,
they will have to decide if they want to give a good service or get the hell out of my industry.
Those comments include...
Last month, MPs asked Wilkinson about what he'd said.
Would you like to explain to us how you came to make such statements?
I have gone on record as apologising for offence caused in association with those events. I stand by that apology. I regret very much any offence that has been taken.
The new Transport Secretary was in Derby today to unveil a £1 billion contract for new trains for East Anglia. Relatively quiet on the issue till now, Chris Grayling said this about Southern and other planned rail strikes.
I think the RMT, frankly, are being utterly thoughtless about their passengers, their customers. This series of strikes that only damages people who travel on the railways is simply unacceptable.
But rail staff aren't happy these days. On Eurostar today, RMT and the white-collar union TSSA announced strikes for this weekend and over the bank holiday over shift patterns. And yesterday, RMT members voted for strike action on the Virgin East Coast Main Line over pay, conditions and safety.
And Michael Crick is outside the Department of Transport in Westminster now. So, Michael, what's happening with the Eurostar strike?
Well, that is on 7 days over the next month. Just 7 days over the next month. The first batch of days is this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday, and then the second batch of days is over the bank holiday weekend, the Saturday, Sunday and Monday. But it's likely to be less disruptive than the strikes that we've seen on southern trains over the last 3 days, because it'll only be one train per day, so most passengers won't be affected. It's about, the unions say that they're basically striking about the management's failure to fulfil what they regard as promises over their work-life balance. They say that the Eurostar management back in 2008 promised to come up with proposals which would make their work-life balance better, give them more time, more convenient hours to see friends and family and so on, and they say they've lost their patience, they're fed up that the management, they say, hasn't come up with such proposals. That's why they're going on strike.
Michael, thanks very much. Well, we're joined now by Mick Lynch, the Assistant General Secretary of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union, and by the Conservative MP, Crispin Blunt, who's just back from that commuter protest. Mick Lynch first. OK, the Southern strike has been suspended. There may be hope there. But strikes afoot at Virgin and Eurostar. I'm assuming that you'll apologise to passengers, will you?
I apologise to passengers disrupted. We take no pleasure in having industrial disputes. We don't want our members to be in dispute. We don't want the public to be disrupted and inconvenienced.
Well, so take the Southern dispute, for example. 306 conductors wreaking havoc with 300,000 passengers' lives. That doesn't seem fair, does it?
Well, there's a very large company involved, Govia, who are disrupting the railway on a daily basis of their own volition. Our members are standing up for safety on the railway. They're standing up for a whole raft of safety competencies, 32 separate safety competencies involved in operating the railway to the proper standards. Govia and the other train operating companies, backed by the Department for Transport, are seeking to deregulate the railway, seeking to lower the safety standards so that they can extract more profit and dehumanise the railway to take staff away.
Crispin, this is over a point of safety. It's a valid strike.
Well, if that was the case, then the rail safety supervisor, the body that overlooks rail safety, might have said so, but it isn't. This is all about a restrictive practices dispute that looks as though it's straight out of the 1970s. We should be beyond this. We actually need...
Oh, so you think that the government should tackle it as was done in the 70s and the 80s? The government should try and break this strike, do you?
Well, the government are standing behind Govia, as they should do, but they also need to be standing with passengers, who are the ones, my constituents, who use this line, as do all the MPs who represent people using the Brighton Main Line, who have had an absolutely dreadful service ever since the investment into London Bridge began, and that was 20 months ago. So this is not just last week or this week or today's strike. This has been ongoing with a very much diminished service, and this dispute just adds insult to injury, and it's been preceded by months of unofficial action with people just not turning up for work.
Sure, but standing behind passengers, does that mean the government putting more investment into the railways?
Well, this franchise has a peculiarity in as much as Govia are paid to manage the railway, but the fare income goes straight from the fare-paying customers to the Department for Transport. Now, any business that was giving a rotten service that hadn't been contracted for with its passengers or expecting their customers expecting something a great deal better would be paying them compensation. Getting compensation is quite difficult in the railways. Delay repay is clunky to do, and the service levels are absolutely atrocious for a whole variety of reasons, of which this dispute is but one.
But should the government be putting more money into the railways generally? Because this comes down to a point about money, doesn't it?
Well, it does come down to a point about money. And the people who use this line are in what's so-called a negative subsidy area. They're actually subsidising the rest of the network. This busiest commuter line in the country is being milked, and the people who run it are milked, and they're being abused by the fact that that everyone appears to be in some kind of conspiracy against them, either to see that they're not properly recompensed when they get a dreadful service, or to help provide a dreadful service for them.
Mick, the Southern dispute is essentially over who closes the doors.
No.
The Eurostar is a dispute about work-life balance. These are, to quote the Transport Secretary, pretty minor matters, aren't they?
Well, the Transport Secretary knows very little about this dispute. There is no dispute about opening and closing doors. It's about safety-critical work, 32 separate competencies, one of which is the control of the powered doors. We're not in dispute about opening and closing doors, despite what the government says. There has been no unofficial action on Southern or anywhere else. What we need is an agreement on the safe operation of the railways.
To explain the sickness rates, before.
I don't explain the sickness rates. I'm not responsible for sickness at Southern. You explain your government's choice of putting Charles Horton in charge of this railway, who failed the Connex franchise, paying him £2.5 million a year. This man is a specialist in failure, but you're backing him to the hilt.
Is this the right moment to knee the customers further in the
There's
groin?
no right moment. Is it the right moment for Southern to impose new contracts on the 21st of August? Should we just wait while that happens?
You know exactly the stress this service is under.
And I know
since the investment went into London Bridge, when there is substantial investment going in, but it's going to take until 2018 to get that investment
So why
in place.
does Southern choose this time to impose new contracts and get rid of guards?
And, well, then take it to the rail safety regulator. Thank goodness it's going back.
Who's on the executive board of the rail safety regulator? Charles Horton.
So they are not equipped to actually judge rail safety.
Chief executive of Southern, they are not equipped to manage this dispute or give independent judgment. They are responsible for running risk. They are happy to have guards on trains on 70% of the railway. They are happy to have 30% of it run DOO. There is no reason, no intervention by the RSSB to change the operating mode on that railway. And if Southern had chosen not to do it, there would be no dispute. And guards would be working normally and passengers would be happy.
This makes no sense to the people I represent. This kind of dispute.
Want guards on their trains.
What they want is an efficient, functioning railway for which they pay a fair price.
And the reason
you should be partnered. You should be in this day and age, not to go to the 1970s and a dispute about restrictive practices on the railways.
Are like the 1870s, not the 1970s.
Well, let's go back to the 1970s. Do you accept that the unions don't have the muscle that they did then? That eventually the government will win because you're not as powerful as you were?
Well, you assume I didn't know we were in dispute with the government. Apparently are. Maybe the Tory MPs can tell us why that is. They are the unseen hand at the table. Peter Wilkinson is the man who set out to bash the unions.
Franchises.
We do not want a dispute on Southern or anywhere else. The company is imposing changes that are the detriment of safety and to the detriment of the public. If they hadn't sought to impose their contracts in the middle of this month, there would be no dispute at Southern, and we would all be working normally.
Peter Wilkinson wants to break the unions. You saw that in Michael Crick's report. That's in writing, his writing. He's the man who runs the franchises for the government.
Well, used to be a consultant for Southern.
Let him finish.
Well, do we actually think that the railways are going to be any better run if we simply move the management to another body?
Hey, but answer that question. The government wants to break this strike.
Well, I think the people I represent want to break this strike. I want to break this strike. This seems completely unreasonable to me, to be imposing this level of disruption. When the safety case, frankly, is not made, and the body that's responsible for overseeing it, you're now saying, is packed with people who are not interested in safety.
Track and drag incidents are on the rise across the railway.
I simply don't buy that the body that's there to oversee rail safety, I would take their judgment. And what I would actually want to see is the RMT behaving like a union in the 21st century, trying to best represent the interests of its members by making sure it's in a partnership to actually deliver a successful service,
and we make thousands of agreements every year with reasonable companies.
For the people that
you are backing up a politically driven agenda to try and break my union and to try and break the guards on Southern. What you need to do is get out of the arena and let us make an agreement with Southern on a reasonable basis, which is what we'll be seeking to do from tomorrow.
You support the government breaking the unions in the way they did in the miners' strike. You just said
I support the people I represent.
You said you wanted to break the union.
I support the people I represent getting a fair deal by paying a fair price for a decent service.
But does that mean more government money? You didn't answer that earlier.
It will almost certainly mean continued government investment in the infrastructure. Some of these tracks are 90 years old. Mick will know this better than I, because he's presumably an industry expert. The investment in London Bridge is long overdue. And there then needs to be a partnership between the rail companies and the trade unions and everyone who's involved in running this railway to try to get that investment in as painless a way as possible, accepting there are bound to be costs to the customer. And it's not being done. The people I represent are being kneed cheerfully in the groin by having this reckless, unnecessary dispute at the moment the railway is under most pressure.
Crispin Blunt, Mick Lynch, thank you very much for joining us.
I've been getting away with it all.